I will call this meeting of TRPA's Advisory Planning Commission to order. It is Wednesday, January 14th, 2026. It's 9:37. And the first item on our agenda is the roll call to excuse me, to determine our quorum. So Tracy, I'm going to go to you.
Mr. Oling? Mr. Kuchnicki?
Here.
Mr. Drew? He did indicate he would join. He's just having internet trouble. Mr. Ehrlich?
Present.
Mr. Ferry?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Good morning.
Ms. Jacobson?
Good morning.
Mr. Letton?
Good morning. I'm here.
Ms. Morales O'Neill?
Morning.
Ms. Cyber?
Good morning.
Chief Drennan?
Good morning, I'm here online.
Mr. Teixeira? Josh, could you return to the meeting room, please? We're having an issue with the mics. Thank you.
Yes, I'll be right there.
Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum, but I guess we should wait until the mics are back working.
Good idea. Thanks, Tracy. All right, members of the public, bear with us just one moment. We're going to take a look at these microphones. We'll be right back on.
Best.
Looks like we're good. Thanks, Josh. All right, let's keep going. We're back. We do have a quorum, and I'm going to go back to Tracy to please go over the remote meeting rules for the day.
Okay. For members of the public joining us today, to observe the meeting, visit trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, select Advisory Planning Commission Meeting, Hybrid Meeting for today's date. There you'll find the link to the public webinar. To make a comment, raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. When the relevant agenda item comes up, if you've joined by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Each speaker will be given up to 3 minutes. For info items, public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting during general public comment. For action or possible action items, public comment will be taken before the commission takes any action. To remote APC members, please raise your hand to speak, mute your microphones unless you're speaking, and keep your camera on if you're able. Remote APC members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, I'm going to take us to item 2. This is approval of the agenda, and it sounds like we may have a change to the agenda, John. Is that true, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only change is the order of planning items 4A and B. We'd like to do, I'm sorry, 4B and C. We'd like to do 4C before 4B. So water quality before forest health.
Water quality before forest health. Okay, that sounds good. So with that amendment, I will approve the agenda as it was posted. And I'm going to take us to item 3. That's disposition of minutes. We do have a set of draft minutes from our December 10, 2025 meeting. It's on page 5 of your packets. Nice job, Tracy. I think they were 70 pages long. Wow. Yeah. Any members have a comment on the minutes? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I agree. Great job on the minutes. They are long, but they're very descriptive. And if anybody wants to see what happened at the meeting, who said what and why, it's pretty much there. The only thing I saw was that during the workshop section, Mr. Ehrlich's name is misspelled with the inappropriate juxtaposition of the R and the L. So that's probably an easy search and find and fix. I did ask Tracy about the format of the workshop minutes, and she indicated that that's the same format that staff used for the governing board workshop. So I'm all good with that. I've looked at a lot of minutes. I hadn't seen that format before, but Tracy set me straight, as she always does. So anyway, with the spelling of Mr. Ehrlich's name changed in the section related to the workshop, I didn't find anything else.
Thank you, Steve. Any other members with a comment on the minutes? I don't see any.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Thank you, Steve.
Second.
Thank you, Garth. All those in favor, or do we don't need a roll call on the minutes, Graham, do we, or?
No, we're fine. Not a roll call.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Kuchnicki, I see you with an abstention.
That's correct. Thank you.
Abstention here, Mr. Letton.
Mr. Letton also.
Mr. Chair, also Mr. Hill. Thank you.
Mr. Hill. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate that. I am now going to move us on to the meat of our agenda. And we're into item 4. That's the planning matters. We have agenda item 4A, which is election of our APC chair and vice chair. Information on this item can be found on page 77 of the packet. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Hester to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Hester here. After the last meeting, Tracy and I sent an email to all of the APC members asking for any interest in serving as chair and vice chair, and also informing them that you and Ellery had both graciously agreed to continue if there were not other people interested. And that's the case. So we're recommending that someone nominate both of you. Okay, and that's the end of my staff report.
Pretty short and sweet.
So, Mr. Chairman, as a former chair of this august body, it's my honor to re-elect you as chair and Ellery as vice chair of the APC for the next 2 years.
Thank you, Steve. Any other discussion, input, nominations from APC members? Both in the room.
This is Robert. I second the nomination if necessary.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, we need a second. So any other discussion? Okay, we'll go at this one. We probably do need a roll call vote, Graham.
Correct. Yes, please.
Okay, let's do a roll call. And are we going to take them separately?
I think we can take them together. If the motion is to re-elect the chair and vice chair, I think we can do it. We can do it together as a roll call.
That'd be fantastic. Let's do them together. We have a motion and a second, and I'm going to go to Tracy for a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Letton,
Aye.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Merle O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Mr. Kuchnicki,
Yes.
Mr. Orling,
Aye.
Mr. Young, Mr. Drew, Chief Drennan,
Yes.
Ms. Stala,
Aye.
Ms. Cyber,
Aye.
and Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion passes.
May I interrupt here? I'm sorry, this is Graham St. Michelle Council. We need to take public comment or offer that. And then we'll just do that motion. And I apologize. We should have just caught that to do it as an action item, take comment before. Thank you.
You're right, Graham. That's my mistake. So I see it. I just didn't turn the page. But I have it now. So everyone let's hold the microphone for a second. So we're going to move to public comment quickly on item 4A. Again, to participate in the meeting, go to trpa.gov. There you'll find a link to our webinar. We'll first take public comment from members in the room. So please come to the podium if you wish to make a comment on 4A. For members of the public online, now's your opportunity. Please either raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. So we'll go in the room first. Seeing none, Catherine, I'll go to you for any members online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one hand raised online. Alan Miller, please unmute to make your comment.
Good morning. I am Alan Miller, a California registered civil and environmental engineer with specialties in water quality and solid waste management and several decades of professional experience, including planning and standards development. Speaking to follow up my written comments. Those comments follow an independent water quality report I prepared last year.
Mr. Miller, this is the election of the chair and the vice chair, just so you're clear. Not
Oh,
the
I
water
apologize.
quality.
I thought it was for all of the items. All right, well, I'll come back and start over when the appropriate time is.
Great, thank you.
Do I need to repeat the motion if there's no further public comment?
Yes, please. Just make the motion second again. I apologize for that.
That's all right. The motion is to nominate Brendan Ferry as our chair and Ellery Stoller as our vice chair of the APC for the next 2 years.
We have a motion. Anyone care to second that?
Second.
Okay.
Well, got Garth. Garth beat you, Robert, this time.
All right.
Sorry about that, but appreciate it. All right, Tracy, back to you.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Marolas O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Mr. Kuchnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Orling,
Aye.
Chief Drennan,
Yes.
Ms. Stala,
Aye.
Ms. Cyber,
Yes.
and Mr. Ferry.
Yes,
That motion still passes.
passed that time too. All right. Thanks,
Mr.
Tracy.
Chair, just to, before you move to the next item, since you passed the election twice, we want to assure the public that the election was not stolen, that the ballots were verified.
No hanging chads.
No hanging chads, nothing like that.
Yeah, that one was legit. Yep. Well, thank you all. I think I'll speak for Ms. Stoller too. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to continuing on another 2-year journey together here. All right, let's keep us going. So as Mr. Hester mentioned earlier, we will hear item 4C before item 4B. So let's move on to that now. This is a water quality thresholds update. We'll be talking about the standards. Information on this item can be found on page 129 of your packet. And we're lucky to have Mr. Segan with us here this morning to go over this item. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Dan Segan, TRPA. It'll be my pleasure to present both of the threshold update items to you today. And I appreciate you indulging me in swapping the order. Hopefully it'll make sense as we start to go through the presentation. Next slide, please. So part of the reason we wanted to take the water quality item first is that there are really two parts of our work to update the threshold standards. And this is a project we've been working on for the better part of 10 years right now. And I think a lot of the time we focus on the substance of the threshold standards, but when we first started on this endeavor, we were also very focused on the administrative cleanup of those threshold standards. And the water quality updates that we're proposing to you today fit squarely in that administrative bin. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as I go over the next couple slides. Next slide, please. So our work to update the threshold standards began about 7 years ago when we engaged the Tahoe Science Advisory Council and asked them basically a fairly broad question that said, what do you think we should do with all of these threshold standards? And what would be the best way for us to organize this system to drive environmental progress within our region? And they did what any good group would do. They looked abroad for other examples. So they surveyed 8 systems within the US, the Great Lakes, the Everglades, the Chesapeake Bay. They looked abroad, they looked to the Great Barrier Reef, and then they looked for broad guidance. So in summary, they looked at 10 different programs for how you organize environmental data to both inform decision makers and the public. And they synthesized that in this report. So based on that report, next slide, please. We embarked on an assessment of our existing standards. So those of you that were there with us at the time would recognize we had about 170 standards at the time, and they identified 5 criteria that we should look at our standards within and say, how do they fare on a scale of 1 to 5? How specific are they? How measurable are they? How attributable are the outcomes that we desire within those standards to the actions that we and our partners within the basin can take? It probably comes as no surprise to you, but none of our standards met every criteria that they set out for us. And actually the vast majority fell far short. And some of the earliest actions that we took were incredibly simple. Things like addressing overlap within our standards. So this slide mentions the 43 overlapping standards that were identified. Next slide, please. There was a number of reasons we had standard for overlap within our standards. So overlap basically refers to 2 standards that are driving sometimes at the exact same outcome. So you'll see there was 9 standards that basically said the exact same thing, that were confusing for people. We had things that we called competing targets, which is basically setting 2 different targets for the same thing in different manners or at different levels. And they basically said, that's really simple to fix. Just take the strictest target. You don't need to adopt 2 different targets. So we had a whole suite of these, and we addressed many of these in our actions in 2017 and 2018. Next slide, please. And then after doing some of the simple stuff, we asked them, what do we do next? How do we proceed with this endeavor and actually get a more robust system? Because taking care of the overlap really is only the low-hanging fruit of this endeavor of cleaning up our entire system. And they wrote us a couple other memos. Some of them are scathing, some less scathing, basically encouraging us to do more to fix our system. And to ensure that all of our standards were specific and measurable. Next slide, please. And some of the advice actually, I should say, is quite simple. This is an action we took early on. The top of your screen is our old standards, and the bottom is our formatted and numbered standards. Because one of the things that the Science Council pointed out is it's extremely hard to have conversations about your standards if you can't refer to each of them specifically. If you're vaguely referring to your nitrogen standard, that second one may be about the streams. That's a very hard conversation to have. So we went through, and one of these early actions we took as part of this administrative cleanup effort was actually numbering each of the individual standards. So the next time we had that conversation, we'd say, oh, I'm referring to water quality 4. It sounds like you're talking about water quality 6. And all of a sudden you can start to have a more coherent conversation about what the protections and what the goals are that are conferred by each of those individual standards. Next slide, please. And so based on the work of the council, we and the governing board adopted as part of our regional plan an adaptive management system that included threshold standard specifications. So basically, we committed ourselves to 3 things when we adopted any future threshold standard. We committed that every standard would be specific, every standard would be measurable, and every standard would be outcome-based. And these, again, going back to that review of best practice of other systems, these were the three core things that kept rising to the top. You can't just have vague statements about what you're trying to accomplish. You actually need to be quite specific about what you're trying to accomplish so that anyone can objectively evaluate it. And you should focus on the outcome you are trying to achieve, 100 feet of clarity or a healthy and resilient forest. You shouldn't be focused on the individual actions of the day or the next week or the means by which you want to get to that goal. Your standards themselves should focus on your big goals. Next slide, please. So why is that so important? Why is organizing information correctly so important? And one of the things that the council identified is it's important not just to us as decision makers, but also to explain your mission to the public. That when you don't organize data correctly, and when you start confusing things like your daily priorities and your long-term mission, people get confused about what you're trying to do, and you lose opportunities for learning and inference about past success and past failure. So they proposed this system, and this is broadly a system structure basically just means put all the information in the right bins. So put your goals in the right bin, put your implementation in the right bin, put your monitoring in the right bin, and then make sure you're reporting on all of that so that you know how you're doing and how you're progressing or not progressing towards your goals. Next slide, please. So that sounds really simple, except when you have a system that currently meshes all of those things together, it actually can seem quite hard to disentangle all of those individual parts. So the council recommended we do that. We threw it right back at them and said, okay, do you think this is a good idea? Help us work through this. What would this actually look like for our water quality standards? So in that packet, you have, or in the packet for today's meeting, we have the Science Council memo where they went through and basically identified where each piece of the existing threshold standards should fit into a more idealized system. Next slide, please. And they basically divided things into 4 categories and suggested that this is how we think about it. So the first 2 are the what are you trying to do? And goals would be a broad statement of your purpose so that you would use not for objective evaluation, but when you're explaining in an elevator to someone else what you're trying to do. An objective is the more detailed version of that what, where you've articulated a specific and measurable standard that would define what success looks like. And that's the sweet spot for where they suggested that our threshold standards should land. They should be those specific and measurable versions of the what are we trying to accomplish. And then the latter 2 are strategies, which are basically broad groups of things that we're trying to accomplish. And then tactics, which are the individual ways that we're trying to accomplish those. So next slide, please. This is just a quick summary. So we've got all of those in our system right now. And they basically said, sort those out into the individual parts of the system that they should actually live so that we all understand what we're trying to accomplish. Next slide. And so the entire structure probably looks familiar to you because we've talked about this a lot, both within the threshold update process and within the environmental improvement program. And here, we've generally talked about it as inputs, outputs, and outcomes. We've labeled on this slide the tactics, strategies, and objectives that the Science Council uses for their partitioning of these individual parts of the system. So again, the outcomes are the objectives, the big things that we're trying to accomplish, 100 feet of clarity as measured by the Secchi disc. How are we trying to get there? So we're trying to get there, our broad strategy. So again, strategies are a big group of things that you're trying to do. Our primary goal or our primary method of improving the clarity of the lake is to reduce pollutant load reaching the lake. That's our strategy. How we do that, the individual tactics that we take. So we're installing BMPs on private property. We're sweeping streets. We are installing large catchment basins. Those are all the things that we're doing to achieve that goal. And one of the things that the council emphasized as part of this is everything within a functioning system is important to achieving that goal. None of the direction from the council is not to give up on reporting on your strategies or stop measuring implementation of your tactics. It's actually quite the opposite. It's sort the information correctly so that you learn from everything that you're doing and how it's contributing to your final goal. Next slide, please. And so how do we implement that within the system? And what does the recommendation before you today propose that we do? So the first are a group of tactics. So, and these we're suggesting should be retained within the code of ordinances. And we benefit from the fact that they're actually already in the code of ordinances. Next slide, please. So one of the tactics by which we're trying to reduce sediment and nutrient load to our lake is preventing runoff from private property, both during construction and afterwards. And so we have adopted discharge limits within our code of ordinances that govern what the runoff from a property is to be, or the effluent concentration from a property, the maximum effluent concentration, in order for us to achieve our long-term goals. So those are already in the TRPA code of ordinances, and we're recommending that those stay within our code of ordinances, the proper place in our system for that tactic. Next slide, please. The second broad group is assessing performance. So if you're familiar with our system, we have a suite of load reduction standards related to reducing all different types of pollutant loads. And you can tell by the construction of those standards that none of them are the ultimate goal here. Each of the standards, we can just take water quality 34, that's at the top of your screen right now, basically says reduce fine sediment load until you have achieved other objectives. So the goal of our pollutant and nutrient load reduction is actually something else. Almost all of the water quality standards reference nearshore clarity, nearshore algal growth, deep lake clarity. They're all serving other goals. And we report on them separately. So here I'm showing something from LT Info related to the clarity tracking, phosphorus load reduction. And the council said, continue to report on these. It's not that any of these are less important, but they are not your ultimate goal. You need to understand how you are doing on them to understand how well your programs are implementing the broad strategy of pollutant load reduction, but don't confuse them with your ultimate goal of restoring mid-lake clarity, because achieving a pollutant load reduction goal is not the same as achieving your ultimate goal. You may still need to do more. Next slide, please. So in summary, I like to end on this slide because this is what the water quality standards would look like after this modification. So we would retain 11 core water quality standards that speak to the actual objectives contained within our water quality program. We ran this proposal by our Threshold Update Initiative stakeholder working group. We actually ran it by them a couple times. And there was a broad discussion about what about other water quality goals that we have. And I just want to remind people going back to my first slide, there's really two parts of this Threshold Update Initiative. There is this administrative cleanup action, and then there is the detailed review of the substance of the individual standards. And back in 2020, our Threshold Update Initiative stakeholder working group looked at this water quality proposal and said basically two things. Yes, implement this proposal, but make sure you address your AIS standards in quick order. Because at the time we had 7 non-specific and measurable AIS standards that were broad statements of purpose, such as reduce the impact of aquatic invasive species on the ecology or on the economy within our region. And that was one of the things that the council highlighted. Of these broad statements are great when you're explaining what you're trying to do in an elevator or to a friend at the beach, but to guide a program, they're insufficient. And rather than implement the suggestion as it was, we switched our attention to actually formulating those AIS standards. And you all will remember last year, we adopted 2 standards, Water Quality 9 and Water Quality 10, related to aquatic invasive species infestations in the main waters of the lake and in the Keys that now provide those specific and measurable targets. So we switched to the substance rather than implementing the administrative cleanup. So this has admittedly been a somewhat herky-jerky implementation of the threshold update, where sometimes we're doing substance, sometimes we're doing administrative cleanup. We recognize we need to do both, and it could probably be smoother, but that's the way we've proceeded thus far. And yeah, I guess the working group recommendation was to proceed forward with these and then move on to the substance again. And with that, next slide. I appreciate all of your attention and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. So it sounds like sticking with administrative only for now, rather than getting into the technical cleanups. Right. And this is just kind of a high level recommendation to continue onward with that approach.
Correct. So just to clarify, the water quality updates today is just an information item in prep for bringing these back next month for a recommendation. The water quality updates we are proposing are part of that administrative cleanup. The next item on your agenda, the forest health updates, are part of the substantive updates of the threshold standards. So I think when we originally started working on this project with the council, there was an idealized version of how it would be implemented, where we would just do administrative cleanup for a little bit. And then after that, we would review all the substance. And I think we've somewhat mixed up that process, where at various times we've been talking about the substance of the standard and then flipped back to continue the administrative cleanup, acknowledging that we need to do both for all of them.
Okay, that's helpful. Put it in context. All right, thanks, Dan. APC members, it's our time for questions, comments. I can start in the room here and then I'll go to online members. Anyone in the room have comments or questions for Dan? Okay, we're good here. So Mr. Young, I see your hand is raised. Let's go to you.
Hi, thanks for the presentation as usual. I don't have a lot to comment at this point, and I probably won't on the substantive changes. I appreciate learning about them and hearing about them. It's important for us to know about them. But I have to have a certain level of faith and trust in you on those, and I do, and on the Science Council. When it comes to the administrative, I often see opportunities to explain, like you said, sometimes the language is great for talking to friends, and sometimes I say we need more of that. And sometimes my comment is exactly like you're mentioning, like this doesn't really help us when we're trying to implement it. And so I really appreciate those comments. In this regard, I think that the way that this is presented in the code is what's clunky about it. It's not, it's just, you know, the reference back to earlier goals that are really the real goal and so forth like that. That is clunky, and it is difficult to read through and keep moving your mind back to the right spot and understanding what's really happening. And when that's going on, there are significant opportunities for graphics and other ways to make the discussion move forward that aren't just a sea of words. And I really appreciate how difficult it is to explain these things. And I appreciate the cleanup very much. My only suggestion is that if any of you also see an opportunity to either replace or some of these words or just add graphics to supplement these words. If you see that as well, the way I do, I would appreciate someone taking a stab at it. Sometimes it really is just hard to start from the beginning and read through these pages and make sure you're making all the correct connections. So that's my only input is, thank you so much for this review. I think it's great. I just see some opportunities for better ways to communicate it. So thank you very much. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. Miss Morales O'Neill, I'll go to you next.
Thank you. Good morning. Great presentation, Dan. The only C I ever got in school was science. So I don't know if this kind of goes off of what Eric might have been also saying is like, for example, can you go back to the previous slide? I just like have some of these words get me. Maybe it's the one before that. Oh no, I'm sorry. Go back to that one. I'm sorry. It was that very first one. So water quality one, when you're talking about that, it refers to 1967 and 1971. Are we saying there that, are we talking about the deepest part of Lake Tahoe? I guess I'm a little confused what we're measuring there. The 97.4 feet, the average levels recorded between what is that? Is that the depth of Tahoe? Which I thought it was deeper than that, but I'm not sure what that means.
This is Dan Segan. I'll jump in there. That is referring to the clarity of Tahoe or the transparency.
Okay.
So it's been measured at a standardized location by UC Davis since the late 1960s. And so that target refers to restoring the clarity as measured by a Secchi disc, which is basically like a white dinner plate. And how deep you can see that dinner plate when it's
okay.
lowered down into the lake.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that's like the type of things like I read through here. And again, I was never good at science. So some of these words, maybe just it like that. Now that my next question was going to be, what is a Secchi disc? But thank you for those clarifications. That's all I have. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Any thoughts for Dan? I was just gonna say, from my perspective, what the Science Council recommended makes really good sense, those 4 categories. And I think we all support you in this endeavor. I just have a question for you, Dan, and maybe it's hard to answer, but I think you use the term herky-jerky in your approach to how you've been updating these. And I mean, is there, in an effort to not continue that, what have you learned so far that kind of moving forward will hone this approach or streamline it or make it, is there a way to improve that we can help you with, or TUI-SWIG can help you with? Or I guess I would just offer that if there's a better approach. I know this stuff is really complex. It's deep, it's historic, it's tied to everything. And so maybe it is just because of those facts, maybe it is just a complicated thing, but maybe Garth will solve this for you right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before Dan answers, I think it's important that this process sometimes, I think it's okay to be herky-jerky, because it is imperative that TRPA has the ability to address issues that come up that need to be addressed in a timely fashion. I think AIS was a perfect example, and I also think Forest Health is a good example. So just taking care of all the administrative side first and then going over and dealing with the substantive issues, I think that it may be too late, right? So I think it's okay to be able to be flexible and address some things that are really time sensitive, and then come back to the administrative side. So I just wanted to give you that point of view before Dan said anything.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve Bashara. So we hear a fair amount of testimony these days about microplastics. Is there any effort underway to address microplastics? I mean, I look at that issue and I think it's microplastics are everywhere. It's completely woven into our entire life on this planet now, which is unfortunate. So I don't know how you isolate that with regard to water quality.
Dan Segan again. I'll start with the chair's question and build off of Garth, and then get to microplastics after. So I think one of the broad lessons we've learned as part of this is not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think we admittedly, myself individually, have often started these and then delayed. And the forest health standards that you'll hear about later today are probably a prime example of that, where if you were sitting on our threshold update initiative stakeholder working group, you'll know that roughly the same proposal was being batted around 3 and 4 years ago. And it's been refined a little bit. I'm not going to say that it's not improved, but I think there's a real question, and we've heard and you've seen in the comments from partners like the League to Save Lake Tahoe, that we may be better served moving faster through some of these things. I think that said, we internally have said that after these updates go through, hopefully in February of this year, that we'll sit down and take a broader look at our entire approach to both updating the threshold standards and the performance measures. Because I think, the other thing we heard from the Science Advisory Council was it's almost as important to update your performance measures as it is your threshold standards. It's really important to have good goals, but it's really important to measure how effective you are in driving to those goals, both in terms of measuring the effectiveness of the work of the EIP partners, as well as measuring the effectiveness of our code of ordinances and our regional plan in deriving the results that we want. So I think you'll hear more about that as we go a little after, I would say spring or early summer of this year, about how we propose to work forward on this initiative. In terms of microplastics and plastic pollution overall, one of the things that the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group talked about is when is it right to set a threshold standard versus when is it right just to try to act without knowing what your final goal is. And I think that's sort of the balance that both we and other agencies are facing when dealing with things like plastic pollution. You may know that the state of California is embarking on a huge effort to try to establish standards for microplastics in drinking water and identify at what level there would be harmful impacts to human health. So we know and not all microplastics the same. That's one of the things that's come up repeatedly in our conversations. The impact of plastics largely derives from the additives and the chemicals used in them. And some, there's fairly robust scientific literature that there's some plastic additives that have incredibly harmful impacts on like salmonid species. So I think as that progresses more broadly, we will move like others into the standard setting phase, as opposed to the research and broad limitation of use phase that I think we're more in at this time.
Makes good sense. Thanks, Dan. Mr. Letton, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Great job, Dan. I was tracking the presentation quite well. Great explanation as usual. But I'm a little confused about how that between what you presented and the agenda packet. So, and maybe it's this administrative versus substantive update that you mentioned, but there's 11 on the agenda packet 130, or sorry, page 132. there's 11 standards listed. And then there's a bunch of red line strikeout, and then a table starting on page 136, in which there's over 30 standards. So what are those? What's the table on one starting on page 136 as it relates to what you're proposing? Can you help me understand what the table is? Is that split into half administrative and half substantive, or just help me understand that part?
Dan Segan again. I appreciate the question. So the question is in reference to attachment B in your staff packet relative to this. It's called the standard crosswalk. And it's something that the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group asked us to prepare so that they could better track the fate and rationale of each of the individual standards. So every standard listed on that table in the attachment reflects the standards as they exist today. And as you referenced, Mr. Ledden, there are more than 30 standards there today. And so if you trace all the way over to column, I guess it's the fourth column with the header notes, that includes, so for the first line, for the first standard, the Sekida standard, it says retain. And so that means we're recommending that stays as a standard. And then the brief rationale for why we're recommending that follows. And that general format follows through for most of for the entire subset of standards as they exist today. And the end result of that, we've recommended retaining 11 and the removal of the other.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That totally makes sense. Thank you. A couple other things here. Of the 11 proposed, you put them into a number of broad categories. What does other lakes mean? Does that mean lakes other than Lake Tahoe in the basin?
Dan Segan again. It does. And so the categories that we put them into are actually the existing categories for the standards today. So we're not proposing any substantive updates. It's interesting you ask about that one because it also came up in our working group discussion related to it. And the working group basically asked us to review the background for that standard and propose recommendations to them about whether the standard should be retained as is or modified. So when we did that research, and this is, I guess, just a little precursor to next month's meeting, the standard was adopted at the time in order to assure that both the board and members of the public understood that basically all water bodies in the region are connected and the impacts to one will eventually make themselves to the lake. So it was designed to encourage management practices that would reduce pollutant loads to all water bodies, not just directly to Lake Tahoe.
Great. And then one final thing. In any of the discussions with the Tahoe Science Advisory Council or the Threshold Stakeholder Working Group, was there any discussion under the aquatic invasive species category about containment? So what I mean by that is, it's pretty clear here that there's some specificity with these standards with the Tahoe Keys. And one of the bigger concerns from ourselves, the Hunt and Water Board, League to Save Lake Tahoe, I know TRPA, and a lot of folks is containment. In other words, trying to mitigate, reduce the amount of fragments of AIS, aquatic invasive plants, from getting out into the main Lake Tahoe water body to try to prevent similar infestations in other locations within the lake. So was there any discussion about containment and how how would you quantify that? How, to your point about goals, objectives, um, uh, uh, you know, I want to say tasks, but that wasn't the one that you used, but, measurable ways to actually achieve some of these goals and objectives. I don't know how you would do that in terms of containment, but was there any discussion along those lines?
So Dan Segan again. The answer is yes. So I think the other words you were looking for are strategies and tactics.
Yeah.
So when we adopted the new AIS standards, so if you're looking at that table again, it's water quality 9 and water quality 10. So water quality 9 establishes the goal, and this here would be the objective of no active infestations in the main lake. And one of the core strategies and tactics for that is preventing water quality, preventing the turons and other fragments of AIS from leaving the keys and getting established around the lake. And as we went through establishing these goals, the AIS working group, I don't know if there's any members here today, proposed a whole suite of things that they should monitor to assess the performance of that. And I think we would put those as part of those strategies and tactics reporting relative to the efficacy of those programs. And you can imagine things like how well is the bubble curtain working to prevent fragments from being released into the main lake. But the ultimate goal of those that we would measure within the threshold standard itself is whether or not any fragments have become established in the main lake and whether or not they become an active infestation.
Great. That sounds, thanks for the response. I see there was, I see how the strategy and tactics are linked even better now through your explanation. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Ben, for those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it. Any final thoughts, Garth? Yeah.
Garth Alling for the record. Just I think one of the reasons why it may have been a little confusing for Ben, because I was confused as well. The table in attachment B, it looks like it's missing rows for water quality 38 through 41. It ends at 37. And I was a little confused when I first looked at that, thinking it was something different first. So you may want to take a look. Thank you.
Take a look at that.
I can jump in this, Graham. I think Dan and I will be sure to take a look at this table and the crosswalk. Just make sure that everything lines up and it's not confusing. I think it's good feedback.
Good, Dan. Okay, cool. I think we as APC are good. And since we were considering kind of joining public comment, but I think we have a lot of folks, looks like they want to talk about water quality. So is it okay if we just do a public comment right here? Yeah, I think it might be a little more, it might make more sense to folks. So let's hear some public comments on what Dan presented. This is item 4C, water quality threshold update, mostly administrative cleanup at this point. We'll go first to members in the room who would like to comment, and then we're going to go online. Again, for members of the public online, go to trpa.gov. There you'll find a link to our webinar. You can either raise your hand at the bottom of the Zoom screen or dial *9 on your phone, and you'll be unmuted by a TRPA staff member. So this is item 4C, if anyone would like to make a public comment. Let's go in the room. Seeing none. Catherine will go online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One hand raised online. Alan Miller, please unmute to make your comment.
Hello, Happy New Year. I'm Alan Miller, California registered civil and environmental engineer with specialties in water quality and solid waste management. Several decades of professional experience, including planning and standards development. And I'm speaking to follow up my written comments. Those comments follow an independent water quality report I prepared last year based on the last several State of the Lake reports from the Tahoe Environmental Research Group. If you followed along, you'll know my findings already, that the approach to Lake Tahoe restoration that has been taken since 1969 of controlling land-based pollutant inputs, controlling erosion and sediment loading, if you will, can't and will not alone lead to the restoration of Lake Tahoe clarity and ecological values. That is, the total maximum daily load regulations and present control measures are insufficient to alter water quality to prevent further declines in clarity and ecology. The principal finding is that strategy alone has no real possibility of changing water quality for the better in this century. With a starting point of 60 feet of annual average clarity and a continued decline of roughly 1.5 feet per year, clarity will likely approach 0 in 40 years or less, despite load reductions in EIP projects completed and planned. That is problem identification. I reminded of the familiar quote that doing the same things over and over and expecting different results is a definition of insanity. If the result wanted is the restoration of clarity, then other approaches will be needed and new solutions. After further consideration, I've come to the conclusion that dilution is the solution to Lake Tahoe pollution. I put this forward as a challenge, both personally and to you, because to dilute a water body the size of Lake Tahoe is anything but trivial, and the dilution water has to be relatively pure and cold. I term this flushing the pollutants from Lake Tahoe. I assert this as a potentially feasible and necessary addition to the restoration toolkit, and that anything is possible, limited mainly by our minds. What I'm aiming toward with this paradigm shift is shaving tens of decades to centuries off that 600-year residence time for water and pollutants in Lake Tahoe, at whatever rates can be achieved and expanded over time using existing and new technologies. Whether and how that can be done is the question, and I see no other potentially feasible alternative at this time. I'm not prepared to say much more than that right now, and certainly not with 3 minutes to speak. While generally supporting the revisions, I put forth a new threshold goal to reduce microplastic contamination to 0 and to maintain Lake Tahoe free of toxicity from microplastics. And I provided some suggestions for shoreline plan amendments. With regard to fish, I think human health advisories for fish consumption need to be issued until consumption standards are developed by agencies in wildlife management. Principally, with regard to shoreline structures, the way forward is to keep Tahoe pure, microplastics endure, use wood, metal, and stone in the shore zone. Thank you for considering my comments and for your comments on microplastics from shoreline structures at the APC meeting last December.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. We'll close public comment. We heard Alan last month, and I think we are trying to address his concerns continually. So thanks for engaging there. Any final thoughts before we move on to forest health? Let's do it. Dan, you're going to stay in that seat. And we're going to go to item 4B, forest health threshold update. Information on this item can be found. I don't think page 79 is right, but I'm not sure what page. It's in there, and I can find it. And I'm going back to Dan here to talk about forest health. Is it page 79? It's page 79. Good job, Catherine. My bad.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Dan Segan again, back to talk about the substantive updates to our forest health thresholds. Next slide, please. So the vast majority of our forest health updates or our forest health thresholds were adopted with the original threshold standards. So we're dating back to 1982. We've done some minor modifications since, but as you might imagine, the world has changed a little bit in that time. We have new and emerging threats that we all appreciate. There's a lot more science on what a healthy forest looks like and should look like. And we also have the opportunity to better connect the threshold standards that we are adopted, the ultimate outcomes that we are driving to the actions that our implementing partners are taking on the ground today. Because I think one of the primary themes in many of the venues related to threshold standards is that our management has not been static over the time, but we've not done the hard work of reestablishing the goals, the ultimate goals adopted in those threshold standards to align with everything that we're doing. Next slide, please. So a quick update on how we arrived at where we are today with our forest background on our forestry. So many of you, most of you probably know that the vast majority of our forest was cut down shortly after silver was discovered as part of the Comstock lode. Then we had roughly, so you're in the late 1800s right now, we had roughly 100 plus years of fire suppressions. We're trying to put every fire out by the next morning. And the result is that we've got an overly dense forest, roughly all the same age. And there's too many trees, basically. And what happens when there's too many trees in that forest? So we're seeing more severe wildfires. We see trees that are stressed, and increasingly stressed trees are impacted by disease, beetle outbreaks, and killed, and they suffer extremely during drought. So they become drought stressed and die as well. So we're seeing more tree die off than we would normally see in a forest that had healthy stands. Next slide, please. I think the other thing to recognize here, and this I probably should have said related to the water quality standards as well, but forests are an essential part of our ecosystem and touch everything that we do. So a healthy forest underpins the ecology and the wildlife within our region. It's critical also to maintaining the water quality of our lake. We know that when forests burn, especially at high severity, there are extreme impacts in terms of sediment delivery to our lake. So maintaining the watershed in a healthy condition is critical to all aspects of our threshold standards. Scenic, rec, everything that we do relates back to a healthy forest. Next slide, please. So again, we're talking about the overall structure of our system and putting things in the right bins and understanding where things live within our system. So today we're talking about the threshold standards, the ultimate goals for our forests. Ultimately, it's the work and the code within our regional plan and the work of our EIP partners to establish those priorities that drive the implementation actions that will ultimately arrive at those. And then we report back out on that in our EIP performance measures and ultimately back to our threshold standards at the end of the day so that we understand are the regulations and are the actions of our partners contributing to a healthier forest within our region. Next slide. So this is where we are in the most recent version of this. But as I mentioned earlier, we started on this project of updating our forest health standards a little over 7 or 8 years ago. And we're in the home stretch right now. During our most recent governing board retreat and following the most recent threshold evaluation, the #1 comment that we heard both from the public partners and members of the APC and the board was that we need to do our part as part of the Forest Health Initiative and ensuring a healthy forest within our region and preparing for wildfire. And one of the things that we identified clearly there was that we need to update our threshold standards to better align with those, the partners, and make it clear both to members of the public and partner agencies what it is we are actually trying to accomplish with those policies. So we accelerated that work after that feedback this summer. You can see we have gone through numerous meetings. The Tahoe Fire and Fuels team has offered their input, the Science Advisory Council. Of course, the Threshold Update Working Group has been a part of it. Other EIP partners have been engaged. And we are here today to provide a broad overview. Later this month, we are actually going to the EIP committee of our governing board, and then we'll be back to you next month for a recommendation on this item and ultimately to our governing board later in February. Next slide, please. These are I think it goes without saying, everything within our region is a result of partnership. These are not standards that we can attain on our own. And we've engaged with all of these partners consistent with what the compact directs. So just a reminder to everyone, while we often refer to them as TRPA's threshold standards, and it is TRPA that adopts them, per the compact, we're adopting them on behalf of the basin overall and all of the partners that are working towards them. They are truly our collective goals. Next slide, please. And so one of the things I mentioned was that the science on forest health has evolved over the last 45 or 50 years since our standards were initially adopted. And some of that science was summarized when the Forest Service adopted their forest management plan now almost 10 years ago. Then many of you are probably aware that the basin engaged in the Lake Tahoe West partnership, which brought together a whole new group of scientists and land managers to again review and update that science for what trajectory we're trying to set our forest on and where we'd like to ultimately go. And we built the basis for our standards. We clearly didn't start from scratch because we had this foundation. So we were able to bring in what had already been done there and then engage with the scientists further to see if there was any additional tweaks that we needed to do based on what was done there. Next slide, please. So what did we hear? I think I'll start by saying we heard that our existing standards were a very incomplete and deterministic view of the forest. So they represented this sort of idealized version of keep 10% in this condition, keep 20% in that condition. And I think one of the real things we heard was that forests are dynamic systems naturally. And our forests in particular are heavily shaped by wildfires, and wildfires play a critical role in our forest. And that role through fire suppression and through the even age stand has been, we've cut off that role. And we need to prepare our forests for wildfires because it's not a question of if a fire will ever burn in Tahoe. Again, a fire will burn in Tahoe. It's a question of what type of fire is going to burn within our forests and preparing our forests to survive and thrive after that fire, and also protecting our community so that it can survive and thrive after the next fire. So with that as a preamble, we heard we need to incorporate all of that science related to what a healthy forest looks like into our new set of threshold standards. And one of the recurring themes we heard both from the scientific community and through the feedback that we heard after the threshold evaluation is that we also need to consider community protection and risk reduction related to fires within our region. Next slide, please. With that as a preamble, we're proposing standards, 4 new standards at this time, that can broadly be grouped into 2 different categories. One related to wildfire on the landscape and around our communities, and the second related to the overall structure of our forests. And the 2 sets of standards really work together to articulate goals that are a healthy, functioning forest that restores the natural role of fire within our region, both in shaping the landscape overall, as well as shaping the habitat and wildlife that thrive in that naturally occurring landscape. Next slide, please. So to go into the fire dynamics standards, there's really 2 different goals for wildfire dynamics within our region. And the goals are set individually based on where in the forest or where in the forested landscape we're talking about. So the green part of your screen is the general forest, and the orange part of the screen is the WUI or Wildland Urban Interface Defense Zone. And we're proposing 2 separate goals for each of those, and I'll walk through the rationale for that and where those goals were derived from in a little bit more detail in the coming slides. But I think it's important for you to recognize these two, the goals vary based on where you are. Are you really close to our community, or are you in the general forest overall? Next slide. So within the defense zone, so the wild and urban interface is the area that is right next to our community structures, or it's right next to the built part of our environment. And here we're trying to limit the fires to just surface fire within that landscape. So these are fires that are burning at a flame length that's under 4 feet. That's how it's defined within this standard, which is a level that allows for people to insert themselves and protect the communities and structures within our region. Next slide, please. Within the landscape overall, we are trying to establish a goal that prevents high severity fires from large patches that would end up in stand replacing events. So a 200-acre patch is roughly about the largest patch size that we think can naturally be repopulated within our forest. And so the goal is to not have these stand replacing events and to limit those areas where fires burn at such high severity that they're fully stand replacing. So again, thinking back, fires naturally burned within our region and will continue to burn. Sometimes they will replace entire sections of forest, and that's a natural process. Our hope is that we also allow for the revegetation of those areas. And so the goal establishes what we think was broadly a healthy forest environment where it could reestablish itself following a large-scale disturbance, such as a large wildfire. Next slide, please. So the second set of goals is broadly for the structure within our forest. So we're thinking the density of the trees within our forest and the diversity of age classes and overall structure within that forest. And as we talk about forest structure, we like to talk about the impact that the structure of the forest has on individual trees within the forest, which is like why we like to include the graphic on the right-hand side of this thing, of the slide. And so in the first years of this tree's life, roughly for the first 100 years of the tree's life, it was in an extremely dense stand, like the ones you may find in our region today. And you know that each year a tree adds a ring, and roughly the distance between those rings is how much the tree grew within that year. And in the first 100 years, you can see that the tree rings are extremely small. So the tree is not adding all that much girth in any of those years. And the reason it's not is because it's competing for those resources, because there are so many other trees next to it. 8 years after that, at the end of the tree's first 100 years of life, there was a forest restoration effort that thinned out the number of trees within the stand that tree existed. And you can see roughly in the 8 years after that, it's added as much girth as it did in the first 100 years of its life. And in part because it's not competing for those resources, so it's not as stressed as it was in those first 100 years. And the risk of being that stressed is that disease, beetle outbreak, fire, any of those disturbances, that tree is at far more risk. And in the forests of the Sierra, if you're thinking back 200 years ago, we had many, many more extremely large trees within our region, but fewer trees overall. You could ride your horse through the landscape at full gallop without knocking your hat off. Next slide, please. So the first relates to the first of the two goals for a healthy forest structure relates to the age of the forest, the seral stage, and the canopy cover. So seral stage, we group into roughly 4 classes. So you can think of an emergent young forest, a mid-age stand that we have today, and then an old growth stand. Today, we have a very incomplete version of goals for seral stage within our forest. We protect old growth, we protect some young, but that's about it. And so one of the main pieces of advice is that we should set broad goals for all several stages within our forest because we want to maintain all of them on the landscape. A healthy forest has a diversity of age classes within it. It's not dominated by a single class. And we also have a healthy mix of open versus closed canopy cover. So a closed canopy cover you can think of as if you're looking down at our forest you're taking a helicopter ride over it. And can you see the ground basically? Can you see through the canopy of the trees and look to the bottom? And so we should also have a diverse goal for those. We should have patches of dense forest and we should have wide open forest stands. And so within the standard that's proposed, we include goals for different forest types that are subdivided based on the age that we think is an appropriate mix within on our landscape, as well as whether or not it's open or closed in each of those age classes. Next slide, please. The second one is for the density of our forests, which is really just how many trees are there and is there are our trees suffering from too much competition? So again, we've established targets for both the number of trees and the basal area, like the overall mass within each of our forested areas, in order to ensure a healthy variety within our forest, and that the majority of our forest is within these healthy stand ridges where we don't think the trees are suffering from over competition. And are going to be more susceptible to things like beetles and drought stress. Next slide, please. So we brought this proposal to our Threshold Update Initiative stakeholder working group about 2 months ago, November 10th. The group broadly supported the proposal, but asked some hard questions about what this would mean for aspen protection within our region and high elevation subalpine pine species within our region. We are going back to them with some recommendations at their January 26th meeting. And I will report back to you, or actually it won't be me, most likely next month, but Mason will be presenting on the result of those discussions and whether or not any new standards are recommended as a result of those discussions at the next month's meeting. Next slide, please. Again, where are we at in this process? So we are in January. The proposal is, we think, mostly formed. We are going back again to the EIP committee later this month and then next month for recommendation. Next slide. But I want to end on both a call to people in this room and then anyone listening online to continue to provide feedback. We are continuing to shape these proposals. And one of the ways that we're seeking additional feedback from members of the public is through the use of a website that explains everything that we've gone through today in a plain language version. And you can see the link for that website on the corner of the upper right-hand corner of this slide, and then provides a venue for people to provide feedback on what direction are we going the right way? Do we think these are appropriate targets? What do you think we should change? That website went up, I think, just before New Year's. Is that right? It went up just before New Year's, and we've already had, I think, 8 or 10 people provide responses through it. And so we're continuing to get the word out to engage people in this process. It was only 8 or 10 earlier this week, but Kim is correcting me that we're over 15 respondents now. So people are continuing or are using it to provide us feedback, and we'll let you know both what we heard and then where we've incorporated those recommendations into this proposal when we come back to you next month. With that, I'll go to the next slide. I appreciate, again, your attention and would welcome any questions.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Seems like a very thoughtful approach. I know I, for one, saw a great presentation on this in, I think it was December at the TIE meeting, Tahoe Interagency Executive Committee meeting. Really good discussion. Obviously, the partnership is pretty large on this with TFFT and the MAC group, and I know they're really engaged, and a lot of highly technical specialists in this area have been engaged thoroughly. So that makes me personally feel good about it. But I'm curious to see what APC members would like to share with Dan and others. So I'll go in the room first. Anyone want to say anything yet, or? Yeah, Ms. Stoller.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Oops. Dropped my glasses.
There they are.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Dan. That was a great overview. I'm wondering if we could go back to the slide that shows the proposed threshold language, both in kind of the more scientific language versus the plain language. Those are the water quality. No, I think the forest health thresholds. This is water quality.
I think if you go the other way, we didn't present it the same way within the water as we did the water quality ones where we listed all of them on an individual side. I think Ellery is talking about
This is a
these.
good example. I just noticed, with your water quality thresholds, I really appreciated them because they were very precisely edited, and you could read them and you could know almost instantly, am I in or out of attainment? And I think you're really close here with these because you do have specific numerical targets, and you have like 5%, things like that, which can be measured. But then there are some words in there that are a little bit more ambiguous, like I don't know if it's this one, but in another one, you say within like a targeted range or within a desired outcome. And so kind of targeted or desired, I don't know what that means. Maybe the experts do know what that means for particular forest types, but it could be cool to see those spelled out a little bit more by those types, just to help better define words like typical or desired.
Yeah, good comment. Is there an accompanying document then that it kind of points to that says here's the desired range, or?
Yeah, Dan Segan again. So we're proposing to incorporate tables that incorporate the desired range. So one of the challenges here, and I think Ellery is alluding to it, is the existing standards basically say, like, let's use the example, like we want a certain percentage of old growth acres in each elevation zone. And really where the proposed standards is that we should set a broad swath for every age and canopy class. And so the only way we could accommodate that recommendation is through a table. And so and we should probably work on the layout and how it's presented, but ultimately it'll say for the healthy range as listed in table, and then the table will appear right below it. We did something similar when we adopted the Tahoe Yellowcrest standards that included the different elevation bands to the lake last year, which was our first sort of foray into that for the threshold standards. Admittedly, the forest health tables are far more complicated because you're looking at 6 to 12 quadrants per. So there's a lot more going on there. But if we can, we're certainly open to how we formulate this better so that people understand the goal we're trying to achieve and ensure that it's not just us that can evaluate them. You could sit in your office and evaluate them, and hopefully we'd arrive at the same conclusion.
Good, thanks. Don't see any others in the room. Let's go online. I'll go to Miss Jacobson and then Mr. Young.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to first just thank Dan for the presentation. It was super informative. And I would echo Ellery's comments on the language for the standards. It seemed like there was some of them were a little bit ambiguous in the language. But I also just wanted to say, I think what I really appreciate was the slide and comments on the partnership. And kind of taking that to the thresholds, the TRPA thresholds, that they're not necessarily TRPA thresholds, that they're thresholds that have been established in partnership with all these other important agencies throughout the basin. So just appreciate that. That's all I have.
Thanks, Crystal. Agreed. Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dan. Since everybody's mentioning the partnerships, I'm going to take a brief moment to remind everybody that it wasn't always like that, and that Joanne Marchetta spent many, many years bringing together many different agencies with a lot of different goals and responsibilities, and turning all those agencies into a group of basin partners. And so I'm just going to take a minute and say thanks again, Marchetta. We're still enjoying the benefits of those years of effort on your behalf. Dan, not only here are you really trying to lay out what a healthy forest is, but I notice in the report that it's the healthy forest of the future, because we have to think about how things are changing. I see this as a great challenge. I do think that there are potentially different versions of a healthy forest, meaning I think you do need to listen to what people have to say about how much aspen do we need? How does that work? What is the different mix? Those are all great conversations. And I really recognize the challenge that you have, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. My one question to you is that, and I'm not trying to be trite, but I feel like our concept of a forest is the trees. And I don't feel like I see enough of discussion about the complexity of what a forest really is, that a forest is not just the trees. A healthy forest is everything from healthy soil to a healthy complex mix of biota that all works together to create this healthy forest. I know you understand that. I'm just curious about how the Science Council sees that, how your groups and discussions have seen that, and why it's not necessary to have more of that discussion in what it means to have a healthy forest, including maybe some thresholds around some of those other things that, in my mind, are what a healthy forest means. So thanks for listening to me, Dan. Thanks for your efforts.
I appreciate it, Eric. Dan Segan again. So you will see in the Science Council's peer review of the proposed forest health threshold standards, comments that basically echo what you just said, that the trees are just one component of a healthy forest, and that a healthy forest includes both, the opportunities that affords people to recreate in it, but it also includes the birds, the bees, and the mammals that roam around the landscape. And I think we 100% agree, and it's our, I guess, somewhat clunky version of target setting that we do these things in silos. And in defense of that, the clunky siloization, and actually hearkening back to Joanne, since you mentioned, Joanne used to be very fond of saying, you can't eat the whole elephant all at once. And I think we've taken that to heart, especially with updating the thresholds, that we can't set targets for everything all at once. And we have been working within these silos or partitions or resource areas, not because we don't acknowledge the links between the individual parts of the system, but just for ease of implementing modifications to that system and getting the right people in the right room for each discussion, and not asking everyone to sit through every discussion. And so, which is only to say that we do plan to work through revised threshold standards for many of the other aspects of a healthy forest landscape. But we've done this basically because of staff limitations and in order to not eat the entire elephant all at once. So that's just to ask to be patient. We'll make it.
Thanks, Eric. Mr. Drennan, I see your hand raised. Let's go to you.
Hey, good morning. First of all, I just want to say it was a fantastic presentation. I think it's really comprehensive. There are maybe a couple of slides that I had some questions on, and they revolve around the landscape fire dynamics. You did a great job of delineating, the difference between the WUI versus the general forest, and how we're approaching fire on the landscape with that. Just a question, I guess, is I want to be clear that in no way is this suggesting that fires that are not prescribed or controlled or planned, that, when we're looking at the proposed standard and some of the plain language with this, that we're not suggesting that we allow those fires to continue. At the moment, we have a full suppression plan with all agencies in the basin, around the basin. So when we have starts that happen that aren't prescribed or planned, we're in a full suppression mode only because of the current condition of the forest. That's sort of juxtaposed with our intent to do as much prowl burning and broadcast burning as we can when the conditions are appropriate. So I just wanted to put the question back to Dan of just confirming that this presentation or your suggestions aren't indicating that we ought to allow up to 200-acre fires when they're on an accidental start.
Thanks for the question, Dancy, again. And in my answer, I'll harken back to the last discussion related to the overall objective, which is, I think, what we're putting on the screen right now, and then the tactics and strategies to get us there. And I just want to be completely clear. This is not, the overall objective does not presuppose a specific strategy or tactic to get us there or require some change in existing behavior. I think what we've heard and what we're proposing is the overall goals in the landscape. And I think we would defer to you and the people on the ground that know the most about how to handle those as to how an individual fire should be handled today or in the future. And this by no means modifies that.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks for weighing in, Chief. Appreciate that. And I see Miss Cyber, you have your hand raised. Let's go to you. How's Hawaii doing today?
It's doing great. Thank you very much. Let me know if it's a little too noisy, this background noise. There's a bunch of people in the office today. I just wanted to chime in, just related to the, Forest Service side here. I think it's aware from the presentation, but we've been, our staff has been working very closely with TRPA staff on these threshold updates. There's some of these nuances with some of these threshold pieces that don't necessarily translate, or sort of the understanding and the background reasons why don't always, come out in these presentations here. But I know there's been some efforts to, discuss how these thresholds work with our existing forest plan and, where there are differences, how we can work through those things. Because for the Forest Service, while we are, we're beholden to the TRPA thresholds, we have the forest plan as our guiding document that we have to meet. And if what we have in the forest plan, does not meet what a new threshold says, then there's a little bit of incongruity there. So I appreciate the group's hard work in trying to make those pieces match up as much as possible, because I think folks recognize that anytime Forest Service, we have to go through a forest plan revision type of process, that can be a pretty big piece. So we very much appreciate, being a major player as a part of this threshold update here. And I know there's a little bit more work to go, but just wanted to put out in the room that Forest Service is going through this effort with TRPA. And I don't know if there's any specific questions. I probably will not be able to answer them, but I could, get back to folks with any specifics related to some of these forest health standards and Forest Service, forest plan type stuff. And that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, we have Mr. Garrett in the room as well, so you're in good company.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, sorry, we didn't get to, it's been an interesting couple of weeks here. And I didn't get to talk to Brian this morning, so I'm glad that he's there to be able to answer any questions if need be. Thank you.
Yeah, he's here. I know you've had a leadership change happening.
Yes, we did. And we got through a big project too. So I'll talk about that later. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Final thoughts from APC before we do a quick public comment on this one? Steve?
So it's been fascinating for me, not only because of the subject matter, but also because of the state of science and the state of people. Yeah, it's hard to separate out science from actual people in my mind. So what Eric referred to, the partnerships. So we have to remember that in 1982, not only was the state of science not as sophisticated as it is today, but neither were the people who were prepared to accept science. I actually was at the 2-day governing board meeting where the thresholds were adopted. And you have to remember, we're coming out of the CTRPA days, and people's acceptance of regional governance was pretty much zero. And so, it's amazing actually that thresholds got adopted at all. And there was some, if I think back of it, part of it was like a city council meeting where there was a lot of yelling and screaming. But in the end, they were adopted. But it's good to remember the context in which those happened and the amount of time that's evolved in the evolution of how we look at thresholds, as Dan has been explaining, and the partnerships, because that was about setting thresholds. Now it's more revising them based on current science and then implementing them. It's one thing to have the thresholds, but it's another thing to implement them. And so I guess my weakness is that things that people say trigger my memory of a lot of things that I've seen in my time here. So it's just interesting to see the evolution of the partnerships to implement, as opposed to just the battle over whether or not there should be any such thing. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve, for that historical perspective, as always. It is good. It's great. Okay, let's wrap us here. And can we move to a public comment portion on this item? Because I know we have some Forest Health folks that are interested. So first we'll go to members in the room, or public members in the room who wish to make a public comment. This is on item 4B. And then we'll go to public members online. Remember, for members on Zoom, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone. You'll be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. And we will go to Miss Patton. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, members of APC. Good to see you all. Laura Patton, Natural Resource Director at the League to Save Lake Tahoe, or Keep Tahoe Blue for the record. These comments I'm going to make are really complementing the written comment that I also provided, which should be in your packet. I want to thank TRPA staff, particularly Dan and his excellent presentation, as well as the Science Council and really all of the partner agencies for the work that's reflected in today's Forest Health and also the water quality threshold updates. In particular, the Forest Health threshold really deserves recognition for the extensive scientific and interagency work that has really informed this to date, going from the 2017 Science Council evaluation, which now was 9 years ago, which is kind of crazy, to today. So really applaud being able to get to where we are now in 2026. The involvement of the council, the threshold update initiative, stakeholders working group, and the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team, which I, sit on a lot of these groups, has resulted in more modern, defensible, and actionable thresholds. And really, that should be viewed as a model not only for the forest health threshold, water quality, but really for future updates. Thresholds are not just reporting tools. They're supposed to be adaptive. Under the Bi-State Compact, they're really the backbone of TRPA's mandate as well. The compact requires TRPA to establish, achieve, and maintain these threshold carrying capacities, really in order to protect Lake Tahoe's water quality and lake clarity. So I really appreciate the work that's been done. Many of these thresholds were adopted over 4 decades ago. So I do just, want to point that out. So we really have a lot of work to do to bring these up to date. These were made under assumptions that really no longer hold in our climate altered system, where we're facing increased wildfire risk, prolonged drought, issues with extreme precipitation and emerging pollutants, such as microplastics, which was mentioned previously. Continuing to evaluate basin conditions against thresholds that are widely acknowledged to be outdated really risks undermining the credibility of the threshold program itself. So really, I'm emphasizing that we continue to update these with the significant work that's been done by all of the partners to make this language really what it is today. While we appreciate the incremental updates today, we really urge APC to recommend that staff and governing board continue really pushing these updates forward. We really need to comprehensively update all of these environmental thresholds before the next threshold evaluation. Evaluating current conditions against outdated standards really doesn't serve the public, the regulated community, or TRPA's legal mandate. Modern thresholds are really essential to maintaining public trust, guiding effective regulation, and ensuring that environmental protection really remains Tahoe's North Star with these thresholds. So just wanted to say thank you for all the work that's been done, and we really hope that these thresholds get adopted in the next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Any other members in the room? Seeing none, Catherine, we will go online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's one hand raised online. Alan Miller, please unmute to make your comment.
Hello again. I don't have any comments prepared. I just want to speak extemporaneously here for a couple of minutes and say that I support healthy forests. Absolutely. They're essential for water quality and all the other ecological values. The APC doesn't include federal representative other than the Forest Service, and I'm particularly referring to the US EPA, which of course didn't exist in 1969, but it's sort of curious that it wasn't added later, or that they don't participate, as there are other participants on the APC who are not designated in the compact. And I would recommend that they become a part of this group. And in particular, I've spoken to Mr. Letton at the Lahontan Water Board about the need to reconsider the total maximum daily load regulations, in particular with regard to the U.S. Forest Service, which has managed to skate by on that one. And that's because at the time, the staff at the Water Board and others, I suppose, didn't think the forest contributed significantly to the loadings of pollutants to Lake Tahoe. And I don't know that those assumptions were ever justified, but they certainly became much less justifiable when the Forest Service ramped up numerous activities all around the basin, and being 70% of the land, that's significant, and was not recognized as such. And there's no load monitoring required of the U.S. Forest Service, nor any limitations on burning, really, other than narrative or subjective sorts of standards. And I know there's been a move towards, reducing that burning, and I totally support that because it's particulate loading and really just fertilizing the basin, and there's enough smoke from other sources. So I really suggest that the states focus on bringing the feds into the picture. The US EPA has ultimate responsibility for the TMDL, which were developed by the states and adopted. And since it's not working, and since it's been in place now nearly 15 years or coming up on that, I think it really needs to be revisited and bring some of these more fundamental things to bear with these partnerships, and get the Forest Service involved in assessing the loadings from its, fuel reduction activities and other things, and get them in the fold. So those are my thoughts today. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Mr. Miller.
And Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll close that and go to final thoughts from APC. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve Bashir. So I do want to structurally say that ever since the presidential forum in 1997, the role of federal agencies has gone up and down a little bit, and structurally it's changed. The EPA is part of what I think the Forest Service refers to as the federal family. And the federal family is all the federal agencies that have any jurisdiction or responsibilities in our region. And the Forest Service takes the responsibility of coordinating with all of the members of the federal family, one of which is the EPA. And so they are not absent from the basin. They're probably a little less visible than they were in the first 4 or 5 years after the presidential forum, but they are still involved in the lake. And so, you can't have an APC with unlimited number of people. And there are seats on this organization that were added legitimately after the compact. I sit in one of them. And Chief Drennan, representing the basin chief, sits in another. So, but we do appreciate, I think we all do appreciate the role of the Forest Service as the lead federal agency in the basin based on property management and land management, that they do coordinate the federal family, and the EPA is one of those. So anyway, just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Steve, for pointing that out. Appreciate it. Okay, I think we're done here. And Dan, we are going to see you next month. Or no, we're going to see Mason next month, probably, when he's back from gallivanting around the world.
You'll see
somewhere.
both of us.
Okay.
I'll be back for water quality.
Great. We will see you then. Good luck at the EIP committee before we see you, and we'll close that item. I'll move us on to item 5. This is reports. And first I'll go to Mr. Hester for the executive director report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few items while Kim Carringer is making her way up here because she's going to share this with me. In terms of your past actions, the shoreline amendments that you all recommended were approved. And the workshop input you provided was also followed up by a workshop input from the governing board at their meeting 2 weeks after yours, or 1 week after yours. And then coming up will be, this is my segue to the upcoming items. The workshop items from you and from the extensive public input process and the governing board will be used to go to the governing board in 2 weeks to put together the scope for the environmental impact statement. And that will come back to you the following month for a notice of preparation hearing and for public input on that EIS. The other items coming back, obviously the thresholds that Dan and Mason will be bringing back. And Dan will also be talking about the policies related to funding that go with the policies DP54 and DP55 on vehicle miles traveled. And I will also be bringing threshold and regional plan introduction amendments that I've worked with the local government folks on regarding putting a map in there with a regional vision and some of that stuff. Those of you who worked on it will know what I'm talking about. And with that kind of report on how your past actions have been received and what's coming up, if there are no questions, I'd like to turn it over to Kim Carringer, who wants to talk about the new and exciting proposal.
Ooh, all right, drum roll. Anyone have any questions for John? Sounds like we have some topics coming up in our meeting, so that's good. And hi, Kim.
Good morning, Chair, members of the APC. Thanks for having me. Kim Carringer, Deputy Director here with John Hester at TRPA. I appreciate the drum roll for this exciting new proposal. We have been working on a new agenda format for both the governing board and the APC. And I'm sure you all are very familiar with the current format. It's been in place for decades. And our goal has been to make the agenda more user-friendly, more navigable, especially for members of the public and the community that follow the meetings or join the meetings. Pretty simple updates can I think improve the navigability of the agenda. So Tracy Campbell is going to send out the new version to you all later this month. We'd love your feedback. We're sending it out to members of the public as well. Anyone that submitted a written comment in the last quarter of 2025, we're going to send it to them as well. And just ask, is this better? Does it help? So stay tuned, look for it. We'd love your feedback. If all goes as planned, we want to debut it next month. Let me know if you have any questions.
That's great. I think that's a good change. I think it could use a little refresh. We're trying to do the same thing at our jurisdiction. Good, new year, new agenda format. Cool. All right. We'll let you know. Thanks for sending it to us. And Graham, we'll go to you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a little judicial update to give this month. Not a case that involved TRPA directly. This is a case more involving, it's directly Placer County was sued by Friends of the West Shore and Tahoe Clean Air. I think some others as well. And this is related to in 2016, Placer County adopted the Tahoe Basin Area Plan. And then in 2023, they made some minor adjustments. These weren't TRPA initiated adjustments. This was something that the county wanted to do to their area plan. And this case involved really looking at, it was in state courts, Placer County Superior Court. So that's where the opinion came out of right now. And when Placer County adopted their area plan, they did an environmental impact report under CEQA. And when they did their 2023 amendments, pretty minor amendments, they did not do anything further other than just an addendum. And these petitioners argued that they needed to do a more substantial supplemental EIR. And they argued that, the case really turned on what constitutes new information. And so they made arguments about increased severity of wildfire, some new guidance from the Attorney General's office in California about how to look at wildfire risk in CEQA analyses. And they cited reduced capacity to roadways due to some new, roundabouts in Placer County, and then some new evacuation modeling technology. This was all in the petitioner's minds, new information that warranted, a deeper environmental impact report for those amendments. And the Superior Court in Placer County rejected those arguments. And that's where it stands now. That came down in the beginning of January. These same petitioners are also suing Placer County. Well, Placer County as well, but you are right, Washoe County too. But also for Placer County's phase 2 adoption. So we'll be staying tuned to that. I mean, you kind of have to look at each one of these as, what was the action that the county took. Every environmental review is really correlated to the action that that was at issue. But I think this was just a helpful case to track. And I know Ms. Jacobson's here, so if she wanted to say anything else, but that was my update.
Thanks, Graham. Good update for all the local government folks to hear. Looks like Crystal's good. So, okay, I'm going to move us on to member reports. Any APC members want to share anything relevant? We'd love to hear it. I'll start in the room and go to Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve to share for the record. So a couple times, former member Kevin Drake and I have updated the group on the status of the effort to potentially incorporate or take to the ballot incorporation of the community of North Tahoe. We previously described the boundary of that. So the update is that we did get a letter from Placer County Elections and Placer County Local Agency Formation Commission indicating that the petition that we had signed as part of our application process did qualify. So there was a sufficient number of signatures of registered voters within the area that were verified by Placer Elections to allow us to move forward with our application to LAFCO. This is a pretty complex and not inexpensive process, as many know. And we submitted a draft application late last Friday. The LAFCO staff had indicated that they were willing to review a draft application to tell us if there was anything missing or anything that they didn't think was articulated per the requirements of California law. So we appreciated their willingness to do that. And then they'll say, hey, here's some feedback, and then we'll finalize the application and submit it. So that's where we stand on that. And so, yeah, that's an exciting update, actually, to be able to get that far in the process. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that's a big deal. Garth.
Nothing at this point in time. Thank you.
Thanks, Garth. Ms. Stoller.
Just to mention that the Nevada legislature's interim session is really kicking off now. We're going to be meeting for the Oversight Committee of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and Marlette Lake Water System a week from Friday, just providing overview presentations. But this is the body that will develop bill draft requests for the upcoming legislative session. And so it's really our opportunity to help improve public policy in the state of Nevada and specific to Lake Tahoe.
Good, thanks. Hitch?
Nothing to report.
Got a new mayor that's the same mayor. Yes. Fun. I'm coming online and I'm going to go down my list here. I'll go to Mr. Hill.
Nothing to report this point. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Kevin. Mr. Drennan.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Mr. Young.
Nothing, thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Miss Cyber.
Yeah, hi again, everyone. We have had a couple of big projects moving through the system here. I think I mentioned the last time we were on that Caldor restoration EA was going to be out for public comment. That was out for public comment in December. That public comment ended January 3rd. We didn't receive a huge amount of comments on that project. Pretty in keeping with the amount of comments that we received on the scoping period. So we're moving forward with that project. Expect to have a decision on that project in early April, late March, early April. We're waiting. We have to finish up our processes here, but that's our Fish and Wildlife Service consultation. That's kind of the date that puts us out to. And then the other big item is our basin-wide trails project. And I don't think that I even had talked about this last time because this sort of had come up a little bit last minute, if you will. For folks' understanding, the basin-wide trails EA is the one where we're authorizing e-bikes in addition to other trails actions on Forest Service trails. And that project had gone almost all the way through the whole process, and we were getting ready to sign that project last February. The new administration came in, and that type of project is called a travel management project. It fits under a specific law. It's the travel management, 36 CFR 220 is a subpart B that this would fall under. And the administration essentially put a hold on those types of projects. And so we were just sort of sitting on that for a while. We were not able to kind of finish out the objection review process and get to a final signature on that. There was recently some movement with some travel management projects at the Washington office level, projects that essentially are opening up access. They started kind of allowing through. And so this project, essentially we got the go ahead to finish up the decision. And as folks may have heard, Eric Walker was retiring. He retired on Friday the 9th, and he asked if we could possibly get that project completed so that he could sign it, since it was mostly his project. During his tenure here, we were able to do that. So I was referring to a big project, a big push. That's what we did. So the signature was last Friday. That is the final signature. We're past all the objection processes. I just wanted to highlight a couple of items related to that and then sort of ask a question of the broader group as well. So first of all, this does not authorize e-bikes on every single trail. So I just want to make that very clear to everybody, and then you can tell everybody you know that this is not authorizing e-bikes on every single Forest Service trail. The current rules say that e-bikes for federal purposes are a motor vehicle and therefore had to be analyzed through this travel management process, and we have to designate specific trails where motor vehicles are allowed. So we went through and did a whole exercise, including, TRPA and everyone through that trail strategy process. And we ended up authorizing 112 miles of trails open to e-bikes that are currently existing. There's some additional mileage of new trails that will be opened as e-bike trails. There's a couple of motorcycle trails. There's a couple of motorcycle and ATV trails that are sort of getting downgraded to e-bike only trails. In addition, there are new non-motorized trails, both sort of some existing trails that were not in our quote forest system. More of a, is it a national forest system trail or is it a user created trail type of a thing? So we incorporated some user created trails, or essentially they're not user created anymore. They've been managed as trails. A lot of these, they just didn't get the paperwork exercise to kind of make them, official trails. And we've also proposed 3 new trailheads with that project. So the way that works with the travel management decision, there is a map that we have. It's a motor vehicle use map, the MVUM, and that map will be updated to show all the additional e-bike trails that are available. We're going through that process. It's one of those things, like, we can't push the button until we get the decision. It's one of those things, the system's working together. So we're going through that process to get the official map updated. But in theory, well, we have dates. So it's like April 1st is when trails would open up to e-bikes. I anticipate we would have a map by then. But the idea is that all of the trails that are currently existing that were in this project that we said e-bikes are allowed, now those are authorized to have e-bikes on them during the season of use that has been designated. Just like the motorcycles, just like the ATVs, there's a season of use that we had to designate. So I know that's a lot of stuff. This project is a big project. I know Tamba and some folks are ready to kind of jump in and get started on this stuff. I don't anticipate that this year we're going to see, huge amounts of new trails being constructed, but I would imagine in 27 we're going to have a lot larger amount of new trails being constructed. But this is also sort of a long-term plan. You know, all of the trails that we had proposed and the trailheads, they're not going to pop up out on the land in, you know, in the next year. So with that, I wanted to see if this group was interested in maybe next meeting or the meeting after, with me bringing sort of just you know, this is what the project is, and kind of going through the maps and just giving folks a little bit better idea about what was specifically in it. I know it's not a TRPA board action. It really would just be more of an informational thing. But I'll put that out to the group if anyone is interested. And with that, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, that's a big deal for the basin. So thanks for letting us know. Well, I'll work with Mr. Hester on whether to agendize that or not. But I like that idea. It's an interesting idea, and it is important. So thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Lutton, coming to you next.
All right, a couple of quick updates. First of all, this is my first meeting back in a while on APC. I had to take a little hiatus because some of you may know I was doing two jobs. I was acting executive officer for the Lahontan Water Board, and also my duties as assistant executive officer. And I want to really thank Brian Judge for filling in during that time. Brian's retired now. So congratulations, Brian, but I really appreciate that. But moving forward, I will be continuing to be the APC rep for Lahontan. And along those lines, I hired a new assistant executive officer or deputy director, Jan Zimmerman. She sits in our Victorville office, way in the southern portion of our region, which is historical in the sense that we haven't had assistant executive officers sit in our satellite office ever. But it's really to create more executive presence in the southern portion of our region to address a lot of significant water quality issues. And, you know, I was putting together a little, some bullet points for something recently, and I thought I'd share it with APC members. It's some factoids about the Lahontan region, which you may not know, but the Lahontan region is 20% of the land area of California. It's 33,000 square miles and over 570 miles long. It has 700 lakes and over 3,000 miles of streams and rivers. So we have an office located here in Tahoe, which represent a very, very important percentage of that total. But I just wanted to share with everyone for some perspective, you know, the jurisdictional area that we are responsible for at the Lahontan region. And then specific to Tahoe, if folks hadn't heard, a couple of months ago, this is kind of old news, but in August we approved a settlement agreement for an administrative civil liability related to a sewer spill up in Carnelian Bay, dealing with North Tahoe PUD and Caltrans, and essentially approved a supplemental environmental project at Syncline Beach for some improvements there to the tune of $845,000. So I know the TRPA folks were tracking that pretty closely. Some of the other agencies might have been. This was a spill that occurred in July of 2024, I believe. So a little old news, but just wanted to emphasize that we're creating some more enforcement presence in the basin, both for spills and complaints, but also for our construction stormwater and industrial stormwater programs, among others. And that's my report. Look forward. I'm happy to be back. Look forward to future, APC meetings. Thanks.
Yeah, we're happy to have you back, Ben. Congratulations on your agency's hiring and continued success. I'm going to go to Miss Jacobson next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things. I was going to report out on the TBAP lawsuits, so I appreciate Graham touching on those. But two other items, one is our 39 North project, which is a large redevelopment project in Kings Beach. There has been a redesign of that project based upon community comments and interest. And that redesign project has been being reviewed by staff, TRPA staff and Placer staff. And it's going to be presented to the Placer County North Tahoe Regional Advisory Committee at their February meeting, which is, I think, the first Thursday of the month. A lot of interest in that, so I think we should have good attendance, and I just wanted to get that out there for those folks listening if they want to attend that, to hear about the changes made to that project and sort of the timeline moving forward. And then also just note that our board is coming to Tahoe on February 3rd. We're going to be presenting kind of an update on our short-term rental program, and then also sort of presenting some options for consideration for the board for a couple of additional sort of adjustments to the program or ordinance updates. And then we come back to the board for any updates to that ordinance, but continue to adjust our short-term rental ordinance and program just based on, input that we get from key stakeholders. And, it's just part of sort of an adaptive management program for that ordinance. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Crystal. Sounds familiar. I think every local government is constantly tweaking short-term rentals. There is no perfect answer there. Okay, Mr. Kuchnicki, you're the last one.
I do not have anything. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for being here, Jason. And that leaves me. I don't have anything major to share other than we're very nearly done with our administrative draft of our area plan called the TED, Tahoe El Dorado Area Plan. And as long as we can stay on track, we'll be doing some public engagement opportunities probably in early March, including coming to the Regional Planning Committee, RPC, hopefully March 25th, just for an informational item. So stay tuned. Hopefully we can stay on schedule for that. Okay, that closes us out, and we have one final public interest comment period. This is item 6 on our agenda. So this is for members of the public who wish to make a final public comment to the APC. We will first go to members in the room, and then we'll go to members online. Please be reminded, APC members are prohibited from taking action for items not on our agenda. For members online, you can click the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone. You'll be unmuted and called upon by a TRPA staff member. We'll go in the room first. Being none, hi there. We will go online, Catherine.
Mr. Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Great, thank you, Catherine. We'll close public comment. Our last item is to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Steve. Everyone have a great day. It is 11:49, and thanks for your input today.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.